"Sir," I said, "leave. This is a high-class restaurant, and we don't serve people like you here." The waiter's voice was sharp, loud enough that every head in the room turned to see what was happening. A tall, older black man stood in the middle of the dining room. He was dressed simply, clean jeans, a white button-down shirt, and a dusty coat like he'd been walking for a while. He had deep brown skin with lines across his face like stories carved by time. His beard was peppered gray, neatly trimmed. He didn't look dangerous. He didn't even look angry. He looked tired. But the staff saw none of that. A woman at the front, blonde hair tied tight in a bun, pearls around her neck, gasped and whispered loudly, "He must be homeless. Why'd they let him in?" Some people snickered. Others just stared with disgust, waiting for him to leave so they could return to their wine and steak. The man didn't move. His eyes scanned the room slowly. A manager came rushing forward, flustered and angry. "Sir, please, this is your last warning. If you don't leave, we'll have no choice but to call the police." That's when a young man at the back corner laughed loudly. Maybe he thought this was the soup kitchen. Someone get the guy a map. More laughter. The man still didn't say a word. Then, one of the waiters reached for his arm. "Come on, old man. Get lost." And in that moment, just as the man turned his head, just as the waiter laid his hand on his sleeve, someone near the bar gasped so loud it silenced the room. "Oh my God, is that?" Everything stopped. All the whispers. All the smirks. One by one, faces turned pale. Jaws dropped. Phones were pulled out. A few people stood up suddenly. Someone ran out of the kitchen. And that's when everything changed. But before we get to that moment, the moment the entire restaurant flipped upside down, let me take you back to how this all started. 2 days before that night, on the south side of Chicago, a soft rain fell over the cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights of a neighborhood long forgotten by the city. Old brick buildings stood shoulder to shoulder like tired veterans, their windows glowing faintly with the yellow light of life still being lived. Inside a small apartment on the 3rd floor, the old man sat at a wooden desk by the window. His name was Elijah Bennett. Most people didn't know that name anymore, not even in the neighborhood. He liked it that way. Quiet was safe. Hidden was safer. Elijah watched the raindrops race down the glass. In his hand, he held a letter. The envelope was thick, creamy, and expensive-looking. The gold seal on the back was stamped with a familiar crest, a crest he hadn't seen in decades. His hand trembled slightly as he opened it. The invitation inside read, "Mr. Elijah Bennett, you are cordially invited to the grand opening of Maison d'Etoile, the most anticipated restaurant of the year, located in downtown Chicago. Your presence is requested at our private preview dinner on Thursday evening, 7 p.m. sharp. We look forward to welcoming you back." Back. That word stuck in his chest like a pebble in a shoe. He hadn't set foot downtown in over 30 years. He hadn't been welcomed back anywhere in even longer. Not since everything fell apart. He stared at the paper, remembering faces, memories, choices that changed everything. For a moment, he almost tore the invitation in half. But instead, Elijah folded it carefully and slid it into his coat pocket. The next evening, he dressed in the best he had. His jeans were ironed. His shirt was clean. He even polished his old leather shoes. His coat, though worn, was warm. There was no car waiting for him. No fancy limo or sleek black SUV. So he walked, almost 5 miles. As he got closer to the glowing towers of downtown, the streets changed. No more cracked sidewalks. No more corner stores or yelling kids. Everything was shiny. The sidewalks were wide and clean. The buildings stretched high like they were reaching for something more than sky. And the people, they moved like they owned everything they saw. Elijah didn't fit. When he arrived at Maison d'Etoile, he paused in front of the tall glass doors. Inside, the lobby glowed gold. A beautiful chandelier hung like a frozen waterfall over the heads of laughing, well-dressed guests. Waiters carried silver trays with sparkling drinks and tiny food that barely covered a fingertip. He stepped inside. That's when the stares began. Not subtle, not kind, like hot spotlights burning holes in his coat. A hostess blinked at him, confused. "Are you here for something?" "Yes," Elijah said quietly. "I have an invitation." He reached into his coat. But before he could pull it out, a waiter cut in. "We're not serving tonight, sir. This is a private event." "I know," Elijah replied calmly. "I was invited." Another hostess came over. Younger, taller. She looked him up and down, then whispered something to the first girl. "Do you have a name?" she asked. Elijah Bennett. The name clearly meant nothing to them. She tapped something on a screen, then frowned. I'm not seeing that name here. I have the invitation. I'm sorry, but we really can't have. The first hostess lowered her voice. People coming in off the street. You understand. I didn't come off the street. Sir, you need to leave, a man's voice said suddenly. A manager had appeared, wearing a sharp navy suit. This is not a shelter. Elijah took a breath. He pulled the invitation from his coat pocket and held it out. But the manager didn't even look at it. A couple walked by, giving him a wide berth like he smelled bad. The woman covered her nose. And then someone laughed. You lost, old man. The words hit like a slap. I said get lost. The waiter snapped again. That's when the room fell silent. That's when someone recognized him. That's when everything started to unravel. Inside the kitchen, chaos erupted. Get the owner, someone whispered. Phones were buzzing. Texts were sent. A young chef dropped a pan. The floor manager's face turned white as chalk. The guests were confused, leaning forward in their seats to get a better look. The old man stood still, calm, watching them all with the same look he had when he entered. No one noticed the woman standing quietly near the back entrance, holding a tray. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't dressed in silk or diamonds. She was a server, black, young, maybe 24. Her name was Danielle. And when she saw what was happening, her heart started pounding, because she knew exactly who he was. But by the time she stepped forward, it was already too late. The moment had already begun, and the truth about who this old man really was about to tear the night wide open. The room was frozen. The laughter had stopped. The whispers had turned into silence so thick, it felt like the air was holding its breath. The manager stood stiff, eyes locked on the man he'd just told to get lost. A few guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some clutched their napkins tighter. Others pulled out their phones, typing quickly, searching. Danielle pushed her tray onto the closest table and stepped forward. Elijah? She asked gently, almost like she was waking someone from a dream. The old man turned to look at her. His eyes softened slightly, but he didn't smile. You okay? She asked, careful not to draw too much attention to herself. But it was no use. All eyes were already on them. Elijah nodded once. I'm fine, baby girl. Wait, someone said near the front. Did he say Elijah? Another voice chimed in. Elijah Bennett. The name rippled across the room like a stone tossed into a still pond. From the corner, a man in a sharp gray suit shot up from his seat, knocking over his wine glass. He whispered something to the woman next to him and bolted toward the back. Meanwhile, the manager took a shaky step forward, clearly trying to recover. Sir, I apologize. We had a mix-up at the front. Of course you're welcome here. Please, let me show you to a table. The waiter who had touched Elijah's sleeve quietly stepped back, looking pale. But Elijah didn't move. His eyes were scanning the room again. Not for a table, not for help, just watching. I asked to see the invitation, Elijah said calmly. You wouldn't even look. The manager swallowed. Yes, I understand. That was unfortunate. But please. I walked here, Elijah continued. 5 miles. Someone gasped. Danielle's eyes welled. I thought maybe things had changed, Elijah said, his voice low and steady. But they haven't. Not really. At that moment, the back door burst open. A woman in a sleek black dress stepped out. Early 40s, elegant, poised, and clearly someone important. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she rushed toward Elijah. And then she stopped, just a few feet away from him. Elijah, she whispered. He looked at her for a long moment. Hello, Rachel. Now that made the room stir. Rachel Woods, owner of Maison d'Etoile, chef to presidents, face on magazine covers and TV shows. And she had just called the old man by his first name. She stepped forward slowly, eyes shining. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, he said. Then I remembered who helped you with your first kitchen. A tear slipped down her cheek. You didn't just help me. You taught me. Behind her, the staff looked like they'd just seen a ghost. The guests stared in awe. Some began to piece it together. Elijah Bennett. Elijah Bennett. The name wasn't just familiar, it was legendary. 35 years earlier, Elijah Bennett had been the talk of the city. Not for drama, not for scandal, but for food. Back then, he had been the head chef and owner of a small, soulful place called Bennett's Table, tucked into a quiet neighborhood far from the glitz of downtown. People lined up down the block to taste his cooking, fried catfish that melted on your tongue, collard greens that made grown men cry, cornbread that could bring someone back from heartbreak. But it wasn't just the food. It was him. The way he trained young chefs. The way he told stories with every dish. The way he let anyone, rich or poor, sit at his tables and feel like they mattered. And then he vanished. One day, the doors were locked. No warning. No explanation. Rumors flew. Some said he'd lost everything in a fire. Others whispered that someone powerful in the city had forced him out. No one really knew. And Elijah never explained. He disappeared so fully that even those who remembered him began to believe he was just a myth. Until now. Until tonight. Danielle watched the whole thing, her heart pounding. She'd grown up hearing her grandmother talk about Elijah Bennett. Her grandma used to say, "That man puts love in the food, not just seasoning." She remembered how her mother once told her, "If you ever meet Elijah Bennett, you listen. That's not just a man, that's history." And now here he was, standing in front of her, after being humiliated, laughed at, treated like dirt. And still, he held himself with quiet dignity. Danielle stepped up beside him. "You want to sit?" she asked gently. He looked at her. "I think I'll stand a little longer." The room was still watching, but the tone had changed. No more snickers. No more side eyes. Now, it was all wide eyes and regret. Rachel motioned to her staff. "Bring him a chair. Bring him water. And someone call security, not to throw him out. To escort anyone who disrespected him out of this restaurant immediately." The manager flinched. Rachel turned to Elijah. "Will you stay? Just for a little while." Elijah looked around the room. Some people turned away in shame. Others looked like they wanted to apologize, but didn't know how. He looked at Danielle. She gave a small nod. So he sat. A silver chair, freshly wiped, placed at a prime table. But just as he took his seat, boom, the front doors of the restaurant slammed open. Two men in dark suits marched in, badges flashing. "Excuse us," one said firmly. "We need to speak to Mr. Elijah Bennett." Now, the room went dead silent. Rachel stepped forward, alarmed. "What is this? Why are you here?" The older of the two men didn't answer her. His eyes were fixed on Elijah. Elijah sighed. Then he stood up slowly. "I was wondering when y'all were going to show up," he said, his voice calm. Danielle froze. Rachel's mouth opened slightly, confused. The guests looked around nervously. The younger officer stepped forward. "Mr. Bennett, you're not in trouble. But there's something we need to talk to you about. Something important." Elijah nodded once. "All right, but I'm not leaving here." "We're not asking you to," the officer said. "But the thing is..." He paused, looked around, then leaned in and whispered something into Elijah's ear. Elijah's eyes widened just a little. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, slowly, he looked up. "Are you sure?" he asked. The officer nodded. Danielle stepped forward. "What is it? What's going on?" But Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Rachel, and for the first time since walking in that door, he smiled. "I think," he said quietly, "things just got a whole lot more interesting." And just like that, the night turned again. Something was happening. Something big. And no one, not Rachel, not Danielle, not even Elijah, was ready for what was coming next. The air in the restaurant was thick with tension, as if the chandeliers themselves were holding their breath. "What did he say?" Rachel asked, eyes flicking between Elijah and the two suited men. But Elijah didn't answer right away. He sat back down slowly, folding his hands together on the white linen tablecloth. The younger officer took a step back, nodding politely, while the older one kept his eyes steady on Elijah, as if waiting for something, permission maybe, or a sign. Danielle could feel her heart thudding against her chest. "Mr. Bennett," the younger officer said again, this time loud enough for a few people nearby to hear. "I know this is all a shock, but we were instructed to tell you first, before it becomes public." That made everyone lean in a little closer. Rachel furrowed her brows. "What's becoming public?" The officer opened his mouth to speak, but Elijah raised one finger, stopping him. "I'll handle it," Elijah said calmly, without looking up. The officer hesitated, then nodded once more and stepped aside, falling silent. Rachel crouched slightly, lowering her voice. "Elijah, is this something bad?" He looked at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not sadness, something much heavier. "No," he said, after a long pause. "Not bad. Just complicated." The whispers had begun again. Low murmurs snaked through the tables like smoke. Guests were leaning across chairs, sharing theories and wild guesses. Danielle stepped closer. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. Elijah smiled faintly at her. That's kind of you, child. But this ain't just about me no more. He stood again, slower this time, and looked around the room. Most of the people staring at him had laughed at him minutes earlier. Some had called him names. Others just stood by and said nothing at all. Now, they watched him like he was the most important man in the room. And maybe he was. I wasn't going to tell this story, he began, voice steady but deep with weight. Not today. Not like this. But since we're all here, maybe it's time. The restaurant was silent. You could have heard a fork hit the floor. Danielle moved closer to stand by his side. He looked at her. You ever hear of a man named Walter Givens? She nodded slowly. Yeah, he's the billionaire who owns half of Chicago. Someone interrupted from the back. Another man added, real estate tycoon. Old money. Born into it. Rachel's eyes widened slightly. What does he have to do with? I taught him how to cook, Elijah said. Boom. It hit like thunder. Everyone blinked. What? Rachel asked, stunned. Back when he was just another scared 18-year-old in the back of my kitchen, Elijah said. His daddy wanted him to take over the family business. But all Walter wanted was to be a chef. That's not in any of the articles, Danielle whispered. No, it's not, Elijah said. Because his daddy threatened to cut him off if he didn't walk away from cooking. Told him he was wasting his time. So, Walter left my kitchen and never looked back. The old man paused. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the water glass in front of him. He took a sip. And 20 years later, Elijah continued, he came back. Asked me to open a restaurant with him. Said he wanted to honor what I taught him. Said he owed me. Rachel leaned in. Wait. Elijah held up his hand. I turned him down, he said. Didn't trust him. He was too different by then. Too polished. Too whitewashed. But I gave him one thing. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of old paper. I gave him a recipe, Elijah said, his voice harder now. One recipe. Something he promised me he'd never use unless we did it together. He looked around the room, locking eyes with several stunned faces. And 2 days ago, that recipe showed up on the cover of Chicago's Best Chefs Monthly, with Walter Givens' name next to it. Gasps. Rachel's mouth dropped open. Danielle took a step back, stunned. You saying? He stole it, someone said from a nearby table. Elijah gave a cold smile. He didn't just steal my food. He stole my name. That dish. It's called Bennett's Dream. Rachel looked sick. Oh my God. I built that dream with my hands, Elijah said. In the back of my old kitchen, with cracked stoves and broken tiles. I gave that man a taste of purpose, and he turned it into a product. Silence. Rachel stepped forward quickly, her heels tapping like drums. Elijah, I didn't know. I swear to you, if I had. I know, he said gently. That's why I came. Not to fight. Not to scream. But to show up. Danielle was still staring at him, stunned. The older officer finally spoke. There's more. Walter's being investigated. We have enough to prove he's been using Mr. Bennett's recipes for years, passing them off as his own. We came here tonight because Mr. Bennett is being offered a full public apology and a legal settlement. The room exploded in whispers. Settlement. Apology. How much? Rachel shook her head. No, not enough. He deserves more than an apology. Elijah looked around at the glittering chandeliers, the polished floors, the guests dressed like royalty. He turned to Rachel. I don't want money, he said. I want my kitchen back. She blinked. Your kitchen? I want to open a place. Right here. Downtown. Where no one gets turned away because of how they look. Where kids like Danielle can learn what real cooking is. And I want his name off my food forever. Rachel stood tall. Then we'll do it. I'll fund it myself. A cheer rose from one side of the room. Danielle covered her mouth. But just as the moment settled, just as hope began to rise like the smell of something good in the oven, the front doors slammed open again. This time, it wasn't police. It was him. Walter Givens. Tall, powerful, and angry. He marched inside, eyes locking onto Elijah like a target. What the hell is going on here? He barked. Gasps rippled again. Rachel froze. Danielle's heart sank. And Elijah? He didn't even blink. He simply turned to face the man who took everything from him and said, Took you long enough. Walter Givens stormed into the restaurant like a man used to being obeyed. Every step echoed across the marble floor. The door behind him swung shut with a heavy thud. His face was tight with rage, his sharp black suit barely containing the fury in his chest. He didn't look left or right. His eyes were locked on Elijah like he was a threat that needed to be crushed. And yet, Elijah didn't move. He stood calmly beside his chair, one hand resting lightly on the back of it, as if waiting for an old friend to finally catch up. "What are you doing here?" Walter snapped, stopping just a few feet away. "This is my event." Rachel stepped forward immediately, placing herself between them. "Actually, it's my event. And you're late." Walter glanced at her, but didn't back down. "Did you invite him?" he asked coldly. "I did," Rachel replied. "And I'm honored that he came." Walter scoffed. "Honored? You don't know what you're dealing with, Rachel." Elijah tilted his head slightly. "Funny. I could say the same about you." Walter took a step closer, towering over him now. "You've got some nerve showing your face here after all these years." Danielle stepped forward quickly, placing herself just a little in front of Elijah, her hands balled at her sides. "He has every right to be here. More than you do." Walter barely glanced at her. "Who even are you?" "I'm someone who knows who this man really is," she snapped. "And clearly, you forgot." Walter looked like he was about to say something, but Elijah held up a hand. "Let the man talk," he said. "Go on, Walter. Tell us all how you're the victim here." Walter's mouth twisted. "You abandoned me, Elijah. You disappeared without a word. I waited. I tried to reach you for years." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "You tried how exactly?" Walter hesitated. I had people reach out." "You mean assistants?" Elijah said flatly. "Secretaries. Lawyers. Not once did you pick up the phone. Not once did you come knock on my door." Walter's face hardened. "You made it impossible. You disappeared on purpose." "I had to," Elijah said quietly. "Because of you and your father." The room gasped again. Rachel blinked. "What does that mean?" Elijah took a slow breath. "When Walter and I first worked together, his father found out. He didn't like that his son was spending time in a black-owned kitchen. Said it was a waste. Said I was dragging him down." Murmurs started up again. Walter looked shaken but said nothing. Elijah continued. "Then one day, someone from the city came knocking. Said my permits were invalid. My licenses were expired. My taxes were being audited. All at once." Danielle gasped. "You think that was a coincidence?" Elijah said, looking straight at Walter. "You think your daddy didn't pull strings?" Walter said nothing. "I lost my restaurant in 3 months," Elijah said, his voice low. 30 years of work, gone. I was warned. Told to walk away quietly or things would get worse. So I did." Rachel stepped back, hand over her mouth. The room was deadly quiet. "I never knew," Walter said finally. "I swear to you, I didn't know my father." "Then why didn't you ever ask?" Elijah interrupted. "Why didn't you ever wonder why I disappeared right after you told your father we were planning a business together?" Walter looked stunned. I thought you changed your mind." "I did," Elijah said. "When the price became my entire future." A long silence passed. Walter looked down. For a moment, he looked like he might actually apologize. His mouth opened, but then something shifted in his eyes. He straightened his back, arms crossed. "So what now? You want me to fall on my knees? Hand over my career? You're 30 years too late." Elijah shook his head. "I don't want your apology, Walter. I want my name off everything that was mine. I want my recipe taken down. I want the credit I earned. And I want to cook again. Out in the open. Without shame. Without fear." Rachel stepped forward. "And I already told him. He'll have a kitchen. I'll fund it myself." Walter's face twisted. "You're making a mistake." Rachel turned to him sharply. "No, Walter. You made the mistake. You used someone else's genius to build your legacy." A few guests started clapping softly. Danielle looked around, stunned, as others slowly joined in. First a table in the back, then another near the window, then more and more. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was growing. A ripple of justice moving through the room. Walter's face turned red. "You're throwing away everything we built together, Rachel." She didn't even flinch. "I'd rather build something real with someone who deserves it." Walter looked like he might explode, but then, suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his face paled. "What is it?" Rachel asked. He swallowed. "It's everywhere." He turned the screen so Rachel could see. Her eyes widened. It was a headline, spreading across news sites and social media in real time. Revealed, famous chef Walter Givens accused of stealing recipes from black mentor Elijah Bennett. Underneath it, a photo of Elijah standing in the middle of the restaurant, dignified, calm, and powerful. More gasps. More phones came out. Guests were already posting, sharing, recording. Some were live streaming. The story was out, and it was spreading like wildfire. Walter's hands clenched. "You set me up," he hissed. Elijah looked him dead in the eye. "No, you set yourself up. A long time ago." Just then, a waiter approached Rachel and whispered in her ear. She nodded grimly. Turning to Walter, she said, "You need to leave." "What?" he barked. "You're no longer welcome here," Rachel said. "Security will escort you out." "You can't do this. This is my—" "Not anymore," she said. Two security guards approached from the side, politely but firmly stepping closer. Walter looked at Elijah one last time. "You'll regret this," he said bitterly. Elijah smiled. "I already spent 30 years regretting trusting you. I'm done with that now." Walter turned and stormed out of the restaurant, the guards following behind. As the doors shut behind him, the room erupted, not in chaos, but in cheers. A standing ovation. Some clapped for Elijah. Some clapped for the truth. And some clapped just to clap, for the moment, for the courage, for the justice that had finally arrived. Danielle wiped a tear from her cheek. Rachel stepped beside Elijah. "Let's get to work," she said. "We've got a kitchen to build." But before Elijah could answer, Danielle's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her face went pale. Rachel noticed. "What is it?" Danielle swallowed hard. "It's my grandmother. She's in trouble. Something's wrong." Elijah's smile faded. The joy in the room was still echoing, but in Danielle's eyes, something dark had returned. Elijah stepped toward her. "Let's go." And just like that, a new journey had begun. Danielle's hands shook as she stuffed her phone into her apron. "She never calls me during work," she said, voice tight with worry. "Something's wrong." Elijah was already pulling on his coat. "You got a car?" "No, Rachel cut in. "Take mine." She snapped her fingers, signaling to one of the valet attendants near the front. "Get my car. Now." Danielle blinked. "Wait, you don't have to." "I do," Rachel said firmly. "Go. Family comes first." Within seconds, a sleek black SUV screeched up to the front. Danielle and Elijah rushed outside. The street was still buzzing. Paparazzi were already gathering near the doors of Maison d'Etoile, shouting questions, snapping photos of Elijah. But security held them back. Danielle jumped into the passenger seat, barely catching her breath. Elijah slid into the back. "Where to?" the driver asked. Danielle rattled off the address like second nature. "South Side, 83rd and Halsted. Red brick building, 3rd floor." As the car pulled into traffic, Danielle stared out the window, her mind racing. Her grandmother, Miss Lila, had raised her. More than just a guardian, she was the soul of their family. The one who held everyone together when things fell apart. A fierce, sharp-tongued woman with a heart that could humble kings and a skillet that could end wars. She hadn't been feeling well for the last few weeks, complaining about her chest, her legs hurting, but always waving it off. Now Danielle was kicking herself for not pushing harder. "You think she's okay?" she whispered. Elijah leaned forward. "Let's not guess. Let's go see." They rode in silence the rest of the way, the bright lights of downtown slowly giving way to the familiar streets of home. Sidewalks grew cracked again. Buildings looked tired. But there was life. Kids laughing under streetlights. Someone grilling out front despite the hour. Old men arguing on a stoop. Danielle's building appeared up ahead. A rust-red brick complex with peeling paint but glowing windows. As they pulled up, she saw it, flashing red and blue lights. Her stomach dropped. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." She flew out of the car before it had even fully stopped, racing up the front steps two at a time. Elijah was right behind her, moving slower but steady. Inside the hallway, neighbors peeked out their doors, whispering. A paramedic brushed past Danielle, carrying a bag. "Ma'am, you can't. She's my grandmother," Danielle cried, pushing past. When she reached the apartment door, it was wide open. And inside, Miss Lila lay on the couch, surrounded by EMTs. "Granny." Danielle dropped to her knees beside her. Miss Lila opened her eyes slowly. "Girl, you louder than a thunderclap," she muttered, her voice faint but teasing. Danielle sobbed, grabbing her hand. "Don't scare me like that. I thought." "She's stable," one of the paramedics said. "Her blood pressure spiked. She passed out, but we caught it early." We'll be taking her to Mercy General for monitoring. She gonna be okay? Elijah asked, stepping into the room. The medic glanced at him, then nodded. If she rests and takes her meds like she's supposed to. Danielle looked at Miss Lila. You haven't been taking your pills? Miss Lila sighed. They too expensive, and I needed to buy groceries. Danielle wiped her eyes, angry at herself. You should have told me. I would have. You already do too much, Miss Lila said gently. You're out here chasing your dreams. I didn't want to slow you down. Elijah stepped forward and knelt by the couch. You raised her well, he said. Miss Lila squinted at him. Do I know you? Elijah Bennett, he said softly. Her eyes widened. Elijah? Bennett's table Elijah? Lord have mercy, I thought you were dead. Or in Paris. Elijah chuckled. Nah, just off the grid. Miss Lila smiled faintly, eyes twinkling. I knew you were too stubborn to die. The paramedics began prepping her for the gurney. Danielle stood. I'm riding with her. Of course, the lead medic said. Elijah stepped back. I'll stay close. She looked at him, tears still in her eyes. Thank you. He nodded once. As the EMTs rolled Miss Lila out, neighbors watched from their doors, murmuring. Word spread fast around here. And even now, as Danielle followed the stretcher down the stairs, people were already whispering. Is that Elijah Bennett? Back outside, Rachel's driver was still waiting. I'll follow the ambulance, he said quickly. Hop in. Elijah climbed into the front this time. He wasn't leaving. Not when Danielle needed him. Not when his people needed him. Hours passed. It was nearly 3 a.m. when Miss Lila was settled into a hospital bed, monitors beeping gently beside her. The color had returned to her cheeks, but she was clearly exhausted. Danielle sat by her side, holding her hand. Elijah paced just outside the room, quiet but present. When a nurse finally came by with updates, Danielle stepped out into the hallway. She's stable, the nurse said. But we need to keep her for observation. She'll need a proper medication plan and follow-up appointments. Danielle nodded, trying to stay composed. We'll do whatever it takes. She doesn't have insurance, the nurse added gently. We'll connect you to resources. I'll figure it out, Danielle said. Elijah stepped beside her. She's covered. Danielle turned. What? I'll take care of it, he said. No. I can't let you do that. You stood up for me when no one else did, he said, voice steady. You're family now, and family looks out for each other. Tears welled up in her eyes again. Thank you. Just then, Rachel called. Danielle answered quickly. Hey, I just wanted to check on her, Rachel said. And to tell you, Elijah's story is everywhere. It's on the news, all over social media. People are calling, asking for interviews, publishers, even Netflix. Danielle's jaw dropped. Netflix? Yep, Rachel said. But more importantly, the city wants to issue a formal apology. Public. On stage. This week. Danielle glanced at Elijah, who was now looking out the hospital window. He deserves it, she said quietly. There's more, Rachel continued. I just got word. Walter's investors are pulling out. Lawsuits are already being filed. He's losing everything. Danielle didn't know what to feel. Satisfied? Yes. But something deeper stirred inside her. Justice had come, but pain still lingered, especially in Elijah. Thank you, Rachel, she said. Tell Elijah I'll see him tomorrow. We've got work to do. Danielle hung up and turned to Elijah. You hear all that? I did, he said without turning. You okay? He took a deep breath. It's strange. I spent my whole life waiting for the world to see me. And now that it does, all I want is peace. Danielle smiled faintly. Maybe now you can have both. He looked at her and smiled softly. But just as they turned to walk back into Miss Lila's room, Elijah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. There was silence for a second. Then a deep, familiar voice on the line said, We're not done, Elijah. You think this is over, but you've made enemies. Real ones. The line went dead. Danielle looked at him. Who was that? Elijah slowly put the phone away. Trouble, he said. Old trouble. Coming back again. The early morning sky over Chicago was a soft gray, hinting at rain. The wind had picked up, brushing against the hospital windows like a whisper no one could understand. Inside, Elijah sat silently in the corner of Miss Lila's hospital room, staring at the floor. Danielle was asleep beside her grandmother's bed, her head resting gently on the edge of the mattress, her hand wrapped around Miss Lila's. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room, but Elijah wasn't listening to it. He was thinking about that phone call. You've made enemies. Real ones. The voice hadn't said a name, but Elijah recognized the tone. Cold. Controlled. Threatening. It wasn't Walter. Walter had always been arrogant, loud, and reckless. This voice had venom in it. Purpose. It wasn't about ego. It was about revenge. Elijah had tried to bury a lot of things over the years. Not just recipes and dreams, but memories. Deals he turned down. People he walked away from. And one man in particular. The man behind Walter's rise. The man who made things happen from the shadows. A man named Richard Voss. And if he was calling, Elijah's chest tightened. He stood quietly and stepped out of the room, letting the door close gently behind him. He needed to think. Fast. Later that morning, Danielle woke to the smell of hospital coffee. She blinked, groggy, and found Elijah sitting next to her with a paper cup in each hand. I don't know if it's drinkable, he said, but it's hot. She smiled sleepily. You didn't have to. I wanted to, he said. You needed rest. Danielle sat up, stretching. How's Granny? Elijah nodded toward the bed. Still sleeping. Breathing steady. Danielle looked at her grandmother for a moment, then back at Elijah. You okay? She asked. You've been quiet since that call. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Something from the past might be catching up. Danielle narrowed her eyes. Like what? Elijah looked at her. There's a man named Richard Voss. He was a silent partner in Walter's family business. Real estate, restaurants, political campaigns, you name it. But he doesn't show up in pictures. Doesn't give interviews. He works behind curtains. And he's dangerous. What does he want with you? She asked. I embarrassed Walter. And if Richard had money tied up in Walter's brand, he just lost a lot of it. Some of those recipes made millions. Now the truth's out. That means lawsuits. Questions. People digging where they shouldn't. Danielle frowned. So, what? You think he's going to come after you? I know he is, Elijah said. I just don't know how or when. Danielle stood, crossing her arms. Let him come. He'll be met with more than silence this time. Elijah gave a soft chuckle. That fire in you. That's your granny's doing. Danielle smirked. She says I got her mouth and her patience. They shared a quiet laugh. But the tension returned quickly. Elijah pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. The same invitation from the restaurant. I want to go public, he said. Not just interviews. I want to stand in front of that camera, tell everything. Names, dates, what was stolen, who helped hide it. Shine a light so bright, even the shadows get nervous. Danielle nodded slowly. You sure? No, he admitted. But I can't hide again. She reached for his hand. Then I'm with you. That afternoon, they returned to Maison d'Etoile. Cameras were already outside. Reporters had taken over the sidewalk, calling out questions and snapping photos as Elijah and Danielle walked in. Inside, the restaurant was busy, not with diners, but with construction crews and PR people rushing around. Rachel was in the center of it all, phone pressed to her ear, clipboard in hand. She spotted them and rushed over. Elijah. Danielle. Thank God. We ready? Elijah asked. Rachel nodded. Press conference is set for tomorrow afternoon. Outside, on the patio. We've got security, media, the mayor's rep, even some local leaders coming. You're the headliner. Danielle looked around. This place looks like it's being rebuilt. Rachel smiled. It is. We're gutting the back section. That's where your kitchen's going. Your name will be on it. We're calling it Bennett's Revival. Elijah raised an eyebrow. That your idea? Rachel shrugged. Yours, actually. You said you wanted your kitchen back. This is it. Elijah looked around the room, taking it all in. The lights. The movement. The respect. After all these years. Feels weird, he admitted. It should, Rachel said gently. But it's yours. Danielle looked toward the back of the restaurant and saw something strange. A man in a suit standing in the corner, watching them. Not taking notes. Not helping the crews. Just watching. He was pale, thin, with slicked-back gray hair and cold eyes. Who's that? Danielle asked. Rachel turned. What man? Danielle pointed. Over there. But the man was gone. Vanished like smoke. Elijah's jaw clenched. Voss, he whispered. Rachel's eyes narrowed. You think he's here? He's here, Elijah said. Just doesn't want us to see him. Rachel looked toward the staff. I'll tighten security. But Elijah shook his head. No. Let him watch. Danielle frowned. Why? Because that means he's scared. That evening, Danielle returned home to check on Miss Lila, who had been discharged under strict instructions to rest. Elijah stayed behind, pacing the edge of the patio where the press conference would be held. He could feel it in his bones. Something was coming. He had faced kitchens on fire, racist investors, crooked city officials. But this felt deeper, more personal. As the sun began to set, casting gold across the windows of downtown, his phone buzzed again. No number, no ID, just a message. You won't make it to that stage tomorrow. Elijah's hands tightened around the phone. He looked up, and across the street, standing in the shadows of an alley, he saw him again. Voss. Staring, smiling, then disappearing. Elijah didn't move. He slid the phone into his pocket, turned, and walked back into the restaurant. Not shaken, not afraid, ready. The next day, Chicago woke up buzzing. Local news channels couldn't stop talking about it. Social media was flooded with posts about Elijah Bennett, the man who once ruled the city's culinary soul before disappearing like smoke in the wind. Now he was back, and he was about to speak. The restaurant's patio had been transformed overnight. A sleek stage had been built beneath a canopy of soft white lights, with velvet ropes marking off the press area. Dozens of chairs lined the space, filled with journalists, food critics, politicians, and curious onlookers who had managed to snag invites. Security stood at every corner, eyes sharp, dressed in black. Drones buzzed overhead. Police cruisers idled on the block, just in case. Backstage, inside Maison d'Etoile, Elijah stood in front of a mirror. He wore a deep navy chef's coat, crisp and clean, with his name embroidered in gold thread, Chef Elijah Bennett. He had been given 5 minutes to speak. 5 minutes to tell 30 years of silence. Danielle stood behind him, fixing the collar on his coat. You look like you're about to run the city, she said, her voice low but full of pride. Elijah chuckled. I'm just trying to remember not to trip over my own words. Rachel entered the room, clipboard in hand. They're ready. You still want to go through with this? He turned and nodded. More than ever. Danielle gave him a final nod. We'll be right behind you. Elijah stepped toward the exit. But just as he reached the back doors leading to the patio, a hand grabbed his arm. He turned sharply. It was a security guard. Young. Nervous. Sir, the guard whispered. There's a problem. Danielle and Rachel were instantly on alert. What kind of problem? Rachel asked. There's a man across the street, the guard said. Tried to come through the staff entrance an hour ago. Said he was media. Didn't have credentials. When we turned him away, he said, the guard hesitated. He said we'd regret humiliating powerful people. Rachel's face turned pale. Voss, Elijah said flatly. Danielle stepped forward. Is he still out there? Disappeared after that, the guard said. But he left something. He handed Elijah a small white envelope. No markings. No name. Just a single line on the front. The past doesn't stay buried. Inside, a photo. It was old. Black and white. A grainy image of a much younger Elijah. Maybe 20, maybe younger, standing outside a small diner with 2 men in suits. One of them was Walter's father. The other was Richard Voss. Danielle leaned in. Is that? Yeah, Elijah said quietly. That was the day I signed a deal with them. Before I knew who they really were. Rachel whispered, he's trying to rattle you. Make you feel like your past will come back to bite you. Elijah looked down at the photo for a long time. Then he folded it, ripped it in half, and dropped it into the trash. He's already behind me, Elijah said. Let's go. Outside, the moment had come. The crowd buzzed as Elijah stepped onto the stage. Flashes lit up the patio like fireworks. Reporters scrambled for position. Microphones were extended. Elijah stepped up to the podium. No script. No teleprompter. He looked out at the sea of faces, young, old, white, black, rich, poor. And he spoke. I was gone for 30 years, he began. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because I was erased. He paused, letting that word sink in. When I opened my first kitchen, I didn't have money. I didn't have a network. I had a skillet and a dream. I cooked with my heart, and I taught others to do the same. And for a while it worked. More flashes. Some heads nodding. Cameras recording every word. But one day, men with money and power decided that my dream didn't fit their plans. They smiled in my face while they made moves behind my back. And when I wouldn't sell my soul to join them, they took everything. My kitchen, my name, even my food. Rachel stood at the edge of the stage, watching, her eyes misting. Danielle was beside her, clutching her phone, streaming it live. But here's the thing about erasure, Elijah continued. It only works if we let them finish the job. I was quiet for too long. I let the shame and fear keep me from standing in front of you. He looked down for a second. His voice lowered. No more. He raised his head again, voice clear and powerful. My name is Elijah Bennett. And I'm not just back. I'm building again. This time, on my own terms. Applause erupted. A standing ovation began. But Elijah raised a hand, calming the crowd. One more thing, he said. This new kitchen we're building? It's not just mine. It's ours. A place where no one is turned away because of where they come from. Where young chefs of color can learn, create, and grow without having to sell themselves to survive. He looked straight into the camera. To the ones who tried to erase me, I see you. But I'm still here. The applause was thunder now. Tears ran down Danielle's face. Rachel clapped furiously beside her. But somewhere in the back of the crowd, hidden behind sunglasses and a press badge, a man watched silently. Richard Voss. He didn't clap. He didn't blink. He just turned and walked away. That night, the city was alive with Elijah's name. Every major network played his speech. Newspapers ran it front page. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Bennett's back. Hashtag Revival Kitchen. Hashtag Justice Served. Inside a small apartment on the south side, Miss Lila watched from her recliner, tissues in hand. That boy speaks like he's been quiet for centuries, she muttered. About time the world listened. Danielle sat beside her, phone buzzing every few seconds with messages from friends, reporters, even celebrities. But there was one message that stood out. An anonymous number. She opened it. A single line. You don't know what he's hiding. She stared at the screen. Then read it again. She looked up at the television, where Elijah was smiling in front of his new kitchen blueprint. Then back down at the message. What was he hiding? The message kept blinking on Danielle's phone screen like a bad omen. You don't know what he's hiding. She read it again. Then again. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. Type what? Who is this? What do you mean? But she didn't type anything. She just stared. Her heart thudded in her chest. Everything okay, baby? Miss Lila asked gently, turning toward her. Danielle quickly locked the screen and slipped the phone into her pocket. Yeah, just tired. Lot going on. Miss Lila gave her that look. One of those grandma looks that could cut right through the soul. Danielle forced a smile and stood up. I'm gonna head to the restaurant. Rachel wants me to help prep for the soft launch. You need anything? Miss Lila waved her hand. Just bring back some of that sweet tea they keep talking about on the news. If it's gonna have your name on it, it better be good. Danielle kissed her cheek. I'll make sure you're the first taste tester. As she left the apartment and stepped into the warm afternoon sun, the message haunted her like a whisper on repeat. What is Elijah hiding? Maison d'Etoile was alive. Not just with the buzz of renovation, but with hope. The kitchen space for Bennett's revival was almost finished. Gleaming countertops. Brand new appliances. A chalkboard wall that read, Where stories become flavor. Rachel had spared no expense, and Elijah's vision was finally taking shape. Even the walls felt like they had purpose. Danielle stepped into the space and spotted Elijah near the back, going over a stack of handwritten recipes with one of the contractors. Hey, chef, she called out. He looked up and smiled. Hey, firecracker. Seriously? That's my nickname now. He shrugged. You light a room up, and if someone crosses you, they get burned. So yeah, firecracker fits. Danielle chuckled and leaned against the doorway. But the smile didn't reach her eyes. Elijah noticed. Something's on your mind. She hesitated. Can I ask you something? Anything. She pulled out her phone and showed him the message. He read it, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. Someone sent this to me last night, she said. After your speech. He handed the phone back without changing expression. Anonymous. She nodded. Then it's noise, he said. People throwing shadows 'cause they can't stand the light. Danielle stared at him. Elijah, is there something I should know? He met her eyes, and for a second, she saw something. Not fear, but a wall. A sudden closing off. He placed the recipe cards down slowly. There are things I don't talk about, he said. But that doesn't mean I'm hiding anything bad. It just means I've been through things most people couldn't carry. Danielle waited, but he didn't say more. Rachel entered, saving the awkward silence. Elijah, press wants to do a walkthrough in 20 minutes. He nodded and turned to go. Danielle watched him walk away. That wall he built around certain parts of himself? It was real, and now she couldn't stop wondering what was behind it. Later that evening, Elijah sat alone in the back of the kitchen, staring at an old photo he kept tucked inside his coat pocket. It showed a group of young chefs in a tiny, hot kitchen. Him in the middle, smiling, happy. One of them was a woman, smaller, fierce eyes, holding a mixing bowl like it was a sword. Her name was Lorraine. No one knew about her. Not Danielle. Not Rachel. Not even the reporters digging through his past. She was the reason Elijah ever stepped into a kitchen, and she was the reason he walked away from it. He had promised to protect her legacy, and himself. But now, the shadows were creeping back. Elijah folded the photo and slipped it into his coat again. He turned off the light and left the kitchen, locking the door behind him. But across the street, half hidden behind a mailbox, Richard Voss watched. He held a phone to his ear. "Yes," he said quietly. "The girl's asking questions." A pause. "No, he hasn't told her. Not yet." Another pause. "Then maybe it's time we tell her ourselves." Danielle couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, phone in hand. That message had unraveled something in her, something she couldn't shake. She scrolled through old articles, news clippings, blogs, anything with Elijah Bennett's name on it. Most of it was recent. Then she searched deeper. Elijah Bennett plus lawsuit. Elijah Bennett plus partner. Elijah Bennett plus Lorraine. Nothing. She almost gave up, until she found a sealed case file from 1994. No details, just the title. Bennett versus Givens Holdings, suppressed records. Her blood chilled. Suppressed? She clicked around, but access was restricted. She shut the laptop, grabbed her coat, and left the apartment without saying a word. The streets were quiet when Danielle arrived outside the restaurant, a warm wind brushing past her. But as she stepped closer, she noticed the back door was cracked open. That wasn't right. Her heart skipped. "Elijah," she called softly, pushing it open. No answer. She stepped into the dark kitchen. A low hum buzzed from the fridges. The chalkboard wall stood out under the moonlight sneaking through the windows. Then she saw it. The recipe cards Elijah had shown her earlier, gone. The stack was missing. And something else, a single white card left behind on the counter. She walked to it slowly. For words were scrawled across it in thin, sharp handwriting. "Ask him about Lorraine." Danielle's breath caught. She turned sharply, just as the door behind her slammed shut, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the kitchen like a wave. Danielle froze. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator motors and the distant echo of a car passing by outside. She reached for her phone. No signal. Her fingers trembled as she switched on the flashlight, casting a narrow cone of light across the steel countertops. "Elijah," she whispered again, knowing he wasn't there. Hoping he wasn't. Her eyes scanned the room. Everything looked the same, but something was off. The chalkboard wall, where the phrase "where stories become flavor" had been proudly written just hours ago, had been wiped clean. In its place, written in jagged white chalk, "She died for you." Danielle stepped back so fast, she nearly dropped the phone. Her heart raced. She spun around, pointing the light toward the door, locked. She tried the handle. Jammed. She backed away, breath quickening, trying not to panic. Okay. Think. There had to be another way out. She darted toward the supply room door, yanked it open, and slipped inside. It was tight, lined with shelves and dry goods. At the back, a small emergency exit, only used for deliveries. She tried the handle. It clicked. Freedom. She burst out into the alley behind the restaurant, the city air rushing over her like water breaking a spell. She didn't stop to look back. She ran. 15 minutes later, Danielle pounded on Elijah's apartment door. It swung open. He was there in a t-shirt and sweats, surprised to see her, but instantly alarmed by the panic in her eyes. "Danielle," he said. "What happened?" "Someone was in the kitchen," she burst out. "They took your recipes. Left a card. Said. She stopped. Her voice cracked. "Said what?" She stared at him, breathing hard. "They wrote on the wall. Said, 'She died for you.' And they left this." She pulled out the white card and held it up. "Ask him about Lorraine." Elijah went still. Absolutely still. Like a man hit by lightning who hadn't realized he was burning yet. Danielle stepped back a little. "Who is she?" He walked past her and sat heavily on the couch. "I knew this was coming," he said quietly. "I just didn't know it had come through you." Danielle didn't say anything. She just waited. And finally, Elijah looked up at her, eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Lorraine was my partner, he began. Not just in the kitchen. In everything. She was brilliant. Sharp. She had ideas nobody in the industry had the courage to try. We built Bennett's table together. But I was the one who got the spotlight. Not by choice. That was them. Walter's family. He nodded. They wanted a face they could control. Someone they could prop up. They told me if I pushed Lorraine into the background, we'd get funding. Exposure. A seat at the table. Danielle's stomach turned. And you did it? I didn't mean to, he said softly. At first I tried to fight. I told her we should walk away. But she said we could play the game, then take the power and run with it. She believed in the long play. He rubbed his hands together slowly. Things moved fast. Too fast. The restaurant exploded in popularity. The media came. I was in every photo. Every article. She wasn't even mentioned. Danielle sat beside him. Did she know? Oh, she knew, he said. She smiled through it. But I could see it tearing her up. And the final blow came when Walter's father told me Lorraine had to go. Said she was asking too many questions. That if she stayed, we'd lose everything. Danielle blinked. And you still? I told her I'd protect her. That we'd walk away together. But before we could, she disappeared. The words hit the room like a crack of thunder. Danielle whispered. What do you mean disappeared? She never made it home one night. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. Danielle swallowed hard. Did they do something to her? Elijah's hands shook. I filed reports. Called every contact I had. I even stood on street corners handing out flyers. But no one helped. No one cared. Not for a missing black woman who wasn't famous. Wasn't powerful. Just another quiet name on a list. He looked at her, eyes bloodshot. Then one day, a package showed up at my door. No return address. Inside was a photo. Lorraine in an alley. Eyes closed. Gone. Danielle's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. There was a note. It said, should have picked the money. Silence. Heavy. Awful. I shut down the restaurant that week, Elijah said. Cut ties with everyone. Moved away. That was the real reason I disappeared. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. I blamed myself. For choosing the spotlight. For not protecting her. And now, someone wants to remind me of that pain. Probably Voss. Danielle wiped her eyes. Why now? Because I'm rising again. And he doesn't want any of this scene. Especially not the truth about Lorraine. Danielle stood. Then let's make them see it. Elijah looked up at her, surprised. You're not scared? I'm terrified, she said. But we don't run. Not anymore. You told your story. Now it's time to tell hers. Elijah stood with her. You know that means digging into things they don't want dug up. Danielle nodded. Then we dig deeper. The next morning, Rachel nearly dropped her phone when Danielle and Elijah told her the truth about Lorraine. I had no idea, she said, stunned. We have to tell this story. I'll call the producers. We can dedicate an entire segment to her. Elijah shook his head. Not through them. Not yet. If we do this, it has to be our voice. No filters. No media spin. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. I'll back you. Whatever you need. Danielle smiled faintly. Then we start tonight. Rachel blinked. Tonight. Danielle turned to Elijah. We go live. Our own platform. You tell the truth. All of it. He nodded. But just as Rachel reached for her phone to begin organizing it, boom. The front window of the restaurant shattered. Everyone dropped. Screams rang out from inside the kitchen. Security rushed forward. Danielle and Elijah hit the floor. Outside the shattered window, a brick lay among broken glass. Attached to it, another white card. Danielle crawled forward and read it aloud. Tell the story, and she dies next. She looked up at Elijah. He was already sprinting toward the door. Danielle followed, heart in her throat. They both knew exactly who she was. Miss Lila. Danielle didn't even wait for the driver. She and Elijah burst out of the restaurant and into the street, dodging shards of glass and startled pedestrians. Elijah's hands shook as he unlocked the black SUV Rachel had kept on standby. Danielle jumped into the passenger seat, already dialing Miss Lila's number. Ring, ring, ring. Come on, Granny, she whispered, her voice cracking. Pick up. Voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. Elijah drove like he was racing the wind, weaving through traffic with calm fury. His eyes didn't blink. His jaw was tight. His grip on the wheel left deep impressions in the leather. Danielle tried the hospital, then the neighbor downstairs. Nothing. No one had seen Miss Lila leave. Her heart slammed against her ribs. When they pulled onto 83rd Street, The red brick apartment came into view. But something was off. There were no lights on in the unit. None. Danielle jumped out before the car had fully stopped, bolting up the steps and throwing open the front door. The building smelled like bleach. Too quiet. No kids playing. No music from the usual apartment down the hall. She reached her grandmother's door. It was wide open. "Elijah," she cried. He was already behind her. They stepped inside. The apartment was still. No signs of struggle. No blood. No shattered glass. But something was wrong. "Granny," Danielle called out. Nothing. She ran into the bedroom. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. Then she spotted it. On the floor by the recliner where Miss Lila always sat. Her reading glasses. Bent. Danielle sank to her knees. "No. Elijah," she whispered. They took her. He was scanning the room, searching for anything that could explain what had happened. Then he saw it. A small white envelope taped to the window. He pulled it down slowly, dreading what he already knew was inside. A photo. Miss Lila, blindfolded, sitting in a chair. She looked unharmed, but scared. And the card attached simply read, "Next time, we won't wait." Danielle clutched the photo with shaking hands, her breath catching. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Elijah knelt beside her. "She's alive. That's what they want us to know." Danielle looked at him, eyes wild with panic. Why are they doing this? What do they want? He stared at the floor for a long moment. They want silence. About Lorraine. About what happened. About everything. Danielle stood. "Then we go to the police. Now." He grabbed her arm, gently but firm. "The police won't touch this. You don't know that." "I do," he snapped, then lowered his voice. "They're in on it." She stared at him. "Back when Lorraine disappeared," he said, "I went to the cops. I begged them. But they told me she probably ran off. No report. No search. They never even filed it. And guess who sat on the board of the police union?" Danielle's eyes widened. "Voss." Elijah nodded. "He's connected. Judges. City officials. That's how he stayed invisible all these years. This isn't just a man. It's a machine." Danielle turned, pacing the room. "So what do we do? Just sit here? Wait for him to call and negotiate with a terrorist?" "No," Elijah said. "We get smart." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" "Elise," he said. "Old friend. Investigative journalist. One of the few people in this city who's not afraid to dig where others won't." He stepped out into the hallway as the line connected. Danielle stood in the silence of her grandmother's apartment, holding the photo like a lifeline. The fear was starting to shift, twist, harden into something else. Rage. When Elijah returned, he was calm but focused. "She's meeting us in 1 hour. She's got access to files the public can't see. We're going to trace everything, Voss's investments, real estate records, surveillance footage from tonight. Anything we can find." Danielle nodded, wiping her face. "Good. We bring it all into the light." "But Danielle," Elijah said slowly, "they don't just want to scare us. They want us to make a mistake. Lose control. Lash out." "I am lashing out," she snapped. "They took my grandmother." "I know," he said, voice steady. "But we can't win this with fire. We win it with truth. The kind that sticks. The kind that burns them." She paused, then nodded. An hour later, they met Elise in a dim, cramped office above a forgotten bookstore on the west side. She was in her 60s, with short silver hair and a fire in her eyes that no amount of years could extinguish. "Elijah," she said, standing to embrace him. "Still dragging thunder behind you, huh?" He smiled faintly, trying not to drown in it. She turned to Danielle. "You must be the one making all the noise." Danielle managed a nod. "Trying." Elise motioned them to sit, then locked the office door. "What I'm about to show you," she said, "doesn't exist. Not officially." She pulled up a map of Chicago on her desktop monitor. Dozens of red dots peppered the screen. "These," she said, "are all properties owned by Voss shell companies. They're tied to nonprofits, restaurants, law firms, anything that looks clean on the outside. But on the inside, laundering, bribery, even trafficking." Danielle sucked in a breath. "How does no one know this?" "Oh, they do," Elise said. "They're just too scared to speak." Elijah leaned in. "Find anything on Lorraine?" Elise hesitated, then pulled up a second file. This was pulled from a private server that connects to Givens Holdings' legal database, hidden under a fake file name. She clicked. A document opened. "Lorraine Mayfield, Internal Risk Assessment." Danielle's blood ran cold. They were watching her? She asked. They were tracking her, Elise said. Emails, movements, meetings. The moment she started asking about money trails and recipe copyrights, they flagged her. Elijah clenched his fists. She wasn't just a partner, Elise said. She was a threat. Danielle stared at the screen, then pointed at something. What's this address? Elise zoomed in. It was a warehouse. On the south side. Registered under a cleaning supply company. But the permit? Showed it was licensed for private security operations. Danielle looked at Elijah. You think she's there? Only one way to find out, he said. Elise grabbed her keys. You're not going alone. Elijah nodded. Then let's go. As they moved toward the door, Elise stopped them. You realize if we're right, we're walking into something very dangerous. Danielle looked back at her. They already took her once, she said. They don't get to take her again. Elijah placed a hand on Danielle's shoulder. We end this, he said. And together, they disappeared into the night, driving straight into the lion's den. Unarmed, outnumbered, but unafraid. The warehouse loomed like a monster in the dark. It sat at the end of a broken street, tucked behind a stretch of empty lots and forgotten auto shops, its windows blacked out, its walls crusted with grime and rust. No signs, no markings, just a single flickering security light over a steel door. Elijah killed the headlights and pulled the SUV to a slow, silent stop about a block away. The engine ticked as it cooled. Danielle leaned forward from the back seat. So what's the plan? Elise checked her phone, scanning a satellite image she had pulled from a secure feed. There's one entrance we can see. Maybe more on the roof or back. If Miss Lila's inside, she's in one of the rear rooms. We won't know until we get closer. Do we know how many are in there? Elijah asked. No idea, Elise said. But judging by the permits and what I've dug up, it's not just a warehouse. It's a holding site. Temporary. Used when they need people to disappear. Danielle felt a chill crawl up her spine. We need to move. Fast. Elijah grabbed the crowbar he had brought from the kitchen. Nothing fancy, just steel and resolve. Elise reached into the glove box and pulled out a small flashlight and a USB stick. If we find a terminal inside, she said, I can pull files. Names. Operations. Enough to bury Voss for good. Elijah looked at Danielle. You ready? Her hands were shaking, but she nodded. I'm ready. They moved under the cover of shadows, sticking to the edges of the fence. The air was thick with the smell of oil and mildew. Somewhere far off, a train rumbled through the city like thunder rolling in. As they approached the side of the warehouse, Elijah motioned for them to stop. A faint light flickered inside one of the upper windows. Voices. Danielle could barely make them out, but one line cut through like a knife. She's old. She won't last the night. Her breath caught in her throat. Elijah's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, but Elise grabbed his arm. Hold up, she whispered. We need a way in without alerting them. They crept around the back. There, half hidden behind a stack of rotting pallets, was a rusted fire exit. Chained, but the lock was old. Elijah pulled the crowbar from his coat. With a pop and a screech of metal, the lock snapped open. They stepped inside. The hallway was pitch black. No windows. Just rows of old pipes and flickering lights overhead. Danielle took the lead now. She didn't think. She moved. Elise whispered directions based on the satellite image, leading them deeper, past storage crates, filing cabinets, and empty rooms that smelled of bleach and dust. Then they heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. Gonna regret this, you hear me? I'm old, not stupid. You lay a hand on me, and the Lord's gonna send you straight to the pit. Miss Lila. Danielle nearly cried with relief. She sprinted ahead, ignoring Elijah's calls to slow down. She turned a corner and found a small, barred room. There she was, sitting in a folding chair, wrists zip-tied, ankles bound, but alive. Granny. Miss Lila's head snapped up. Her eyes widened. Danielle. Danielle lunged forward, but the door was locked. Elijah, she called. He rushed over, pried the door open with one hard pull of the crowbar. The metal shrieked, and the door flew open. Danielle dropped to her knees, cutting the ties with a small knife Elise handed her. Are you okay? She asked, breathless. I've had worse, Miss Lila muttered. One of them touched my hair, though. That boy's gonna need stitches. Even now, jokes. Elijah smiled. But then, footsteps. Heavy. Fast. Elise turned. They're coming. Danielle helped Miss Lila to her feet. Go, Elijah said. Back through the fire exit. What about you? Danielle cried. I'm staying. Someone's got to keep them busy. No, Danielle yelled. We're not leaving you. Danielle, go. But before she could argue, the door at the end of the hallway burst open. 3 men in tactical vests stormed in. Run, Elijah shouted. Elise pulled Danielle and Miss Lila down a side corridor, guiding them through the maze of boxes and crates. Behind them, they heard shouting, then the sound of something crashing. Danielle looked back, her heart shattering. Elijah. They ducked out the fire exit just as headlights flashed in the alley. It wasn't their SUV. It was a black sedan. The back door opened, and out stepped Richard Voss, smiling, calm, like he was arriving at a dinner party. Well, he said. I expected a little chaos tonight, but not this much. Elise stepped in front of Danielle and Miss Lila. Get out of our way. Voss smiled. You don't get to dictate terms. This ends here. Then, boom, the warehouse door exploded open behind them. Elijah burst out, blood trickling from his forehead, shirt torn, but standing. Behind him, fire licked out from a broken gas line. One of the guards had accidentally triggered a spark. Flames danced along the wall. Sirens screamed in the distance. Voss turned, and for the first time, he looked afraid. You wanted silence, Elijah shouted. But now the whole city's listening. He held up a flash drive. Everything you buried, emails, files, deals, it's all right here. Voss lunged forward, but Danielle was faster. She stepped between them and punched him square in the face. He hit the ground hard. Police cars screeched into the alley, lights blazing. Officers stormed out, guns drawn. Freeze. Voss tried to stand, but Elijah dropped the flash drive into the officer's hand. Everything you need is on that, he said. The officer nodded. We've been waiting for this. They slapped cuffs on Voss. Read him his rights. He didn't fight. He didn't even speak. He just stared at Elijah with eyes full of poison. As they loaded him into the cruiser, Elijah turned to Danielle. You okay? She nodded, then looked around. Where's Elise? But Elise was gone. Vanished. Elijah smiled faintly. That's what she does. Miss Lila groaned beside them. Can someone please take me to a Waffle House now? I've been kidnapped and missed dinner. Danielle laughed through the tears. Elijah put his arm around her. You saved her, she said quietly. No, Elijah replied. We saved each other. As the fire trucks rolled in, and the city lit up with sirens and headlines, Danielle looked up at the night sky and whispered, It's finally over. But Elijah looked back at the warehouse, smoke billowing into the dark, and said nothing. The sun rose over Chicago like a slow exhale after a long-held breath. Lights spilled between buildings, washing the city in gold. The streets buzzed with early morning life. Kids dragging backpacks to bus stops, coffee carts lining up on corners, and newspapers fluttering on stands with bold headlines that made the whole city stop. Richard Voss arrested in explosive cover-up scandal. The truth about Lorraine Mayfield. City's shame unveiled. Chef Elijah Bennett, a legend reborn. Inside Bennett's revival, the air smelled of fresh paint, roasted garlic, and something sweet baking in the oven. The soft opening was only hours away, but already a line of people had formed outside. Neighbors, fans, reporters, people who had grown up on stories about Elijah Bennett's food, and those who had never heard his name until justice brought it roaring into the light. Elijah stood in the center of his new kitchen, dressed in a crisp white apron, a black chef's coat, and a smile that hadn't come easy. The space around him gleamed with warmth. Copper pots, brick walls etched with quotes from black chefs and elders. A wall dedicated to Lorraine Mayfield, featuring a photo of her in that old, smoky kitchen, fierce eyes, mixing bowl in hand. Danielle stood beside him in her own apron, eyes shimmering with pride. You sure you want me on the line tonight? She asked. You've earned it, Elijah replied. Besides, we need someone who can season the mashed potatoes without turning them into salt bricks. Danielle smirked. That was one time. From across the dining room, Rachel approached, clipboard in hand, beaming. Full house for the soft launch. Reservations are packed for the next 3 months. Food critics, local leaders, even a few celebrities. Elijah just smiled. He wasn't here for the cameras anymore. He was here for the soul. He looked at Rachel. Any word from Elise? She left a note at the front desk, Rachel said, handing it to him. Elijah opened the envelope. Inside, justice served. Keep cooking. He folded the note carefully, slid it into his pocket, and nodded. Later that night, the lights dimmed, the doors opened, and the guests began to pour in. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Plates were passed. And then, the first dish arrived. A small bowl of red beans and rice. Simple. Perfect. Cooked by Elijah. Garnished by Danielle. Served with a story written on the menu. This dish was the first thing Lorraine Mayfield ever taught me to make. She said, "If you can feed a soul with rice, you'll never need a crown." This one's for her. Guests were silent as they tasted it. Some closed their eyes. Some wept. And Elijah, standing at the kitchen window, didn't need a review. He didn't need applause. He just needed that moment. Back in the corner, Miss Lila sat with a glass of sweet tea, legs crossed, watching it all unfold. "You did good, baby," she told Danielle as she walked by. "You gave our name power." Danielle kissed her cheek. "You gave me everything I needed to get here." Miss Lila pointed her straw at Elijah, and he gave it back to the city. Across the room, Elijah stepped out of the kitchen and onto a small stage at the edge of the dining area. The room went quiet. He looked out over the crowd. "I don't have a long speech," he said. "I just want to say thank you. For seeing me. For seeing us. For making sure people like Lorraine aren't forgotten. And for reminding me that food isn't just about taste, it's about truth." He raised a glass. To every story they tried to bury. The room raised theirs. To every voice they tried to silence. Glasses clinked. And to every fire that refused to burn out. A standing ovation followed, not out of politeness, but out of deep, earned respect. As the night carried on, Danielle stepped outside for air. The city glowed around her. Warm. Alive. She pulled out her phone. Another message from an unknown number. She braced herself, but this time, it just read, "Thank you for telling her story." She smiled. A soft wind passed through the street, lifting the sounds of music and joy behind her. And in that moment, she knew. They had won. Not just the fight, not just the restaurant, but the legacy. Elijah joined her outside, gazing up at the stars. "Still think I should have walked away?" he asked quietly. Danielle shook her head. "You walked toward everything." He looked at her. "So did you." She bumped his shoulder. "Guess we're both firecrackers now." They both laughed. And from behind them, the door opened again, spilling light into the night. Bennett's Revival. A place where the past had been healed. The truth had been served. And the future was just getting started.